Good evening. My name is Arlene Miller, and it's my privilege to welcome you to this edition of Our Town. In preparation for the May 10th annual town meeting in Long Meadow, I have as my guest Stephen Crane, the town manager. Welcome.
Thank you, Arlene.
Thank you for making time to do this.
I look forward to this every year.
Every year we have fun. This is an unusual town meeting in that it's got a lot of articles for us to consider. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be long, and there's been a lot of preparation before this town meeting to be sure the articles are clear, be sure that all of the residents are notified. I know for myself and everybody else, we received a warrant packet, I'll call it, it's in the reminder a couple of weeks ago, about the end of April. And
should have been last Thursdays.
And it's terrific. It's not to bedtime reading because it's pretty heavy, but there's a lot of information in here about the preparation of the warrant and it contains the complete warrant. So just in summary, if I may, there are 32 articles on this warrant. And in addition to that, 2 more articles are going to be considered as part of a special town meeting within the town meeting. It's not as complicated as it might sound. Just some issues that came up after the final ink was put on the warrant that need to be considered in a timely fashion. So typically all over the Commonwealth, people use this procedure to insert articles. And so we'll talk briefly about those. But our challenge today, Stephen and I have agreed that it'd be really important to go through the gist of most of these articles so you as residents get a feel for what's going to be happening that night. And that will help the efficiency of the town meeting. If you and I do our homework, this meeting can go faster.
I agree. I think the town meeting is the legislative session for the community every year. This is essentially the list of bills that the legislative branch has to consider and vote on. And it's important business, certainly how the town appropriates funds to continue operations and do capital and fund the schools and everything else. That happens right there at town meeting. Yeah. We do expect that there are certain articles enlarged in the citizens petitions that are going to generate a lot of interest. I've certainly heard from people who have never been to town meeting before but are coming because of some of the citizen petitions and some of the other articles. But we do have a new moderator, but I want to commend Rebecca Townsend. She really is really deeply interested in making sure town meeting is smooth and efficient. She has developed a consent agenda.
Why don't you explain that? And this is really the effort of this consent agenda, and he's going to explain it, is to try to bundle together some less than controversial or non-controversial articles to try to create efficiencies within the town meeting. So if we can take 6 or 7, 8 or 9, I can't remember how many there are, and vote with one vote, we're moving along fast.
Yeah, you save minimally a half an hour of the meeting. And there are things that get voted on every year: the vending machine account for the schools, Goldthwaite Trust appointees, snow and ice deficit. These are things we do every town meeting.
They're more ceremonial and housekeeping than they are controversial.
But if people want to ask questions, like the snow and ice number is $60,000 on top of the $100,000 budget, people may say, why is it $60,000? We hardly got any snow. If they want an explanation, they can yell "hold" when the moderator announces that article, and we can explain it.
Well, not just that. She said that removes it.
It removes it automatically
and puts it right back on the agenda. So it's not to say there can't be discussion or that we're trying to truncate good conversation. It's just to try to create an efficiency out of respect for the attendees because of the length of the meeting.
Yeah. Just to highlight a couple of things, one of the articles, or 2 of the articles that are on the consent agenda are not annually recurring things. They are increases in the demand fees for sewer and also collecting property tax. And basically, a demand fee is a late charge, if you will. If you look at your credit card or a utility bill, you get assessed a late fee, and a demand fee is essentially the same thing. By virtue of state statute, it requires a town meeting vote. Typically, the select board sets fees for all their things, but when we did our annual fee schedule, we realized that this needs a town meeting vote. It's a very minor change. I think it goes from...
It's a $15 thing.
Yeah, it goes from 15 to 30 if you, on both the sewer and the property taxes. And I'm sorry, it's $15 demand fee in the property taxes. I think it's currently 5.
Right.
And then the other one is 30 on the sewer. If you pay your bills on time,
you'll never see this.
You'll never see this. This will never happen to you. Yeah. When someone does go into arrears on either taxes or utility bills, it takes a lot of staff time to process that paperwork and send out the notifications to the person and do all the things you have to do when you're trying to collect money from people.
Right.
And so the fee is intended to offset that, and it just hasn't been raised in so long that it doesn't, and even at that, it doesn't even come close.
So it's a fair and reasonable amount of money to cover the costs, the admin costs for this this activity of doing that. So there are, what, 2, 4, 6, 8, there are 9 articles on the consent agenda that will be explained in a full explanation that will be handed to residents.
Yes, it'll be a
when they
separate
get their-
document from the warrant.
Separate document, and probably be online in advance.
I believe it is online already. I know
Currently.
the moderator posted it to her moderator Facebook page. It's probably on our website as well, but it'll definitely be handed to town meeting voters as they enter the hall, enter the gymnasium as a separate standalone document, so they can. So you're not doing this with your warrant as we're going through it.
Right.
So that we hope people will give consideration to this concept of the consent agenda. It is a way to make town
Yeah,
meeting more efficient.
It's not a trick, it's just a way to try to get things to move along in a timely fashion.
Every year we get feedback from people, especially more senior residents, that it goes too late, and then there are things they are concerned about that they can't vote on because of the lateness of the meeting. And we spend a lot of time thinking about ways to still give the legislative issues the due consideration that they
Right.
merit,
Right.
while also making it so people can have the ability to vote on things even if they are later on the warrant.
And I know Rebecca is very committed to that process. She's committed to the ceremonial stuff in the beginning. She's committed to allowing fair and reasonable dialogue, respectful, fair and reasonable dialogue, but also trying to use these techniques to move the meeting along.
Yes, and the other thing is, the other unusual thing you mentioned is the special town meeting within the town meeting.
Yes.
The first article of that is to acquire temporary construction easements for the Converse Street reconstruction project, which is a.
So those are not in here anymore.
They're not in here right now.
Didn't even see them. So I didn't look at them.
They should be
I knew
posted
the second
online.
one.
It will be, truthfully, the packet that goes out with the consent agenda will also have these 2 articles in it.
Okay, I know one of them, not the second.
Right, they were voted on by the select board. To acquire easements or to acquire property for
Along
the town.
Converse.
Anywhere, it requires town meeting
Yeah,
vote.
right.
So we're not acquiring people's property forever. It's just a temporary easement, really largely related to work on sidewalks. We're installing sidewalks throughout the project, and when you think of the edge of the town's right-of-way limits, it's usually at the back of the sidewalk. And so as the people who construct the sidewalks are doing the forms and pouring the concrete, they're standing on private property.
Oh,
and so the easement
it's not really a permanent thing, it's a temporary construction
just
issue.
throughout the duration of the project. People will be getting compensation for giving up the rights to have the people be on their property while they're doing the work. And it's Converse Street. We get a lot of complaints about it, and this is a major, regionally significant project. It is a state-funded and state-run project. It's not a town-run project, but getting what's called the right-of-way plan approved is a town responsibility. It's one of the things we have to do to get the millions of dollars they're giving us.
We'll hear more about that at the town meeting.
You will hear much.
But so there's 2 articles on the special town meeting within town meeting. That's the first. The second one has to do with community preservation.
Community preservation. We had a project that went out to bid. The library stairs and ramp that town meeting had already funded. Unfortunately, our bids came back higher than the appropriation, and because we can only ask for appropriations during town meetings, we had to go back to this Community Preservation Act, who funded the project, and ask them if they would give us more money, and they very generously have given us an additional appropriation. The reason why these are separate articles as a special town meeting is, as you mentioned, this information wasn't finalized until after the warrant was already done. So we hope people will support both of those. They're really important for town infrastructure projects.
Sounds easy peasy for me. That's great.
Good.
Okay, so we're going to just sort of go right through this, or the warrant, which of course is the Bible for the town meeting, and. The first article is the William Goldwaith, which is part of the consent agenda. The second is the snow removal deficit. That's part of the consent agenda. The third is requires a 4/5 vote. That's to pay a bill from last year, $1,000.
2 years ago.
2 years ago, $1,000 bill requires a 4/5 vote. Again, this is nothing new to town meeting members. We do this as traditional. 5 is to $78,000 to complete part of the funding and financial stuff related to the high school. 6 is what is that?
That is we do a triennial
Right.
measure and list for the assessor's
assessor's
office.
assessment.
And it's a contracted service, and it's a pretty substantial contract, so we split out the cost
Over 3 years.
3 years rather than asking for almost $200,000.
It's a reeval of the town's,
Right.
of the town property. It's required by Proposition 2.5, actually.
Yes.
It's one of the elements in Prop 2.5. And so this is, it's 150 plus thousand.
It's more than that.
2,000.
It's over $200,000.
Now, and so we do it over a couple of years.
Yep.
So that's on the consent agenda also. And 7 is, that's something you want to talk about?
Yeah, very briefly, it's a $50,000 appropriation to do to retain some engineering and engineering/really consulting firm to help us look at a stormwater enterprise fund. And for those who haven't been following the latest and greatest on stormwater management, the Environmental Protection Agency, so the federal government, has just promulgated a new regulation regarding the handling of stormwater. It's called MS4, and it's because it's an acronym with 4 M's in it. I'm sorry, it's M and then there's 4 S's. So MS4, if you Google MS4, you'll see a lot of information about it.
So to explain what stormwater is.
Yes. Stormwater is not sewer water. Stormwater is runoff from rainstorms
The
and things like
street.
that. Yep. So you see sometimes the stormwater drains that have the fish symbol on them because they drain right into our culverts and dingles and things like that. That's stormwater. Sanitary sewer water is
There's
the
a
things.
separate line.
Right, your households, toilets, sinks, things like that. The federal government is essentially an unfunded mandate to increase the quality of or decrease negative impacts on
From the runoff,
stormwater
sure,
from runoff,
sure.
which is something that's been talked about for many years.
Salt, fertilizer.
Yep, all that
Good
stuff.
stuff.
Grass clippings from people cutting their. So there are going to be additional costs associated with meeting this new mandate, and many communities are turning towards an enterprise fund to dedicate funds to meet this challenge, and it gets referred to almost universally as the rain tax. It's not. It is a fee, which means tax-exempt entities will have to pay as well, because the charge is. You can set it up a few different ways, but the charge is usually based on how much impervious surface you have, meaning like paved. If you think of paved parking lot as impervious, meaning water can't go into it, versus your front lawn, which is pervious, meaning it can absorb water. That's how they evaluate it. So this doesn't impose the fee. It doesn't do anything like that. It just helps us study what our costs could look like in different ways we could offset
So
those
an
costs.
enterprise fund is a separate dedicated fund that can only be used for the particular purpose that it's established for. And it takes 2/3 money to take money out of it, enterprise fund,
Yep.
not to put in?
No, once it's established, the funds go in automatically as a charge.
Go in. So where is this money going to come from for the enterprise fund? In other words, is it going to be part of my tax, or is it going to be a fund off of the water bill?
It would likely be built in Lancaster, Wisconsin, the town I was the manager of before I came here. It was a part of your water and sewer bill.
Okay,
a separate utility charge on your water and sewer
Okay.
bill. And how it worked there, which is the way it works in most places, is each single-family residential home is one
flat
unit.
fee.
Flat fee.
Flat fee.
Each house is counted as one unit.
Not
but then the
related
shopping,
to using, not to any water usage or anything else, just a flat fee.
Flat
Okay.
fee, but they did have units of measure. And so a shopping center may be 10 units.
Okay.
But all single-family homes, no matter how big, no matter how much driveway area they had, were all one unit.
Basically, okay.
So we may end up with a system like that, we may not, but it's incumbent upon us to study that with this new mandate.
And everybody in the Commonwealth is probably going to be doing similar stuff?
This is the new local meals tax. A few years ago when the state gave the local
Right.
option meals tax, it went from 1 or 2 having it to 100 having it.
Right.
This is the new version of that essentially. But again, it's a fee, not a tax. I know some people don't think it's a distinction without a difference. It just helps us study what our options are.
Okay, good. And 8 is the,
Budget, the annual town budget. I think it's been well documented that the select board and the school committee worked closely together to try and go into town meeting and present in the warrant a budget that they both.
a uniform.
Yeah, some level of uniformity and collaboration.
Right.
I think both groups will probably tell you that there are parts of it that they're not happy with, but when you're making a deal, that's usually the way you want to end up.
Compromise.
It's definitely a compromise. That's something that.
62 million.
Yep. 62 million in general fund. Well, actually not general fund. The general fund is 57, and then you've got the solid waste and recycling enterprise fund, water and sewer. But the total budget that's voted on in Article 8 is 62 million. It does include free full-day kindergarten. The town did make some reductions in commitments to certain policies, but we know that the school committee, its top priority was funding kindergarten, and I think all parties compromised to try and achieve that goal.
And without layoffs and all of the above. So this
Yes.
is a service as usual, and even more service because it's got full-day kindergarten.
I would say it's not service as usual. I think there are reductions in key areas, or if you will, we were not able to expand key areas of service that we wanted to provide a higher level of service.
Sure.
But we are presenting something that both elected bodies agree with and hope town meeting will support.
And the Finance Committee recommends.
And the Finance Committee recommends.
That's all
correct.
good thing.
Everyone has recognized that this was a tough budget year. I do think that for the community, this is the face of the new normal, and I think we are already having a discussion about how can we do better next year and put town meeting and put the elected officials and town meeting in a position where we can have a budget that minimizes the potential for conflict.
I think you did a great job this year.
Yeah,
It sounds like this is very optimistic.
Yeah,
from
I think,
everything I hear.
Yeah.
But and we'll see, because if you can keep your budget presentation to less than 20 minutes, that would really help the town.
I honestly asked if I could get away with not giving a PowerPoint, but I was told that I really have to present the budget.
But you can do it.
I can very
Remember your father or grandfather's message about?
Yes. No, I know. Not being talked about. Yes. I promise you, I won't be the delay in the town meeting.
No, good. So then the next one is the capital committee, planning committee's requests. Anything you want to say about that?
It's not a very aggressive year with capital projects, and I think even when you get to the water and sewer articles that require 2/3 votes, we don't have a very aggressive capital plan this year. Part of that is driven by not a reduced level of need, but where projects are in their life cycle. But part of that is really a lack of funding based on the compromise.
Too, more than
and we're bonding more than we normally would.
And you've got community preservation money that's
And we have community preservation. I think it's a great plan. All of the upgrades that are here are needed upgrades, whether it's new vehicles or water main replacements. They are all highly needed projects. There are a lot of things that did not get funded. But this is a good
it's $1.4 million.
Yep.
It's still healthy amount of money.
Plus water and sewer contributions.
Right. So it's how much of the budget was put toward this? I guess it's 2.5%, or
it's slight, like 2.52%.
Okay.
Of the general
so that
budget.
this town, and to its credit, has made a commitment to take a certain amount of the allowable appropriation and invest in capital infrastructure every year.
We do.
Not every community does that.
No, not every community. And some people just take their Chapter 90 and do only that.
Right.
I think that we're still trying to catch up on capital needs that may have been deferred in favor of other expenditures over time. There's not enough money in the world to fully catch up, but we're trying every year.
And I think it's a great job. But this requires a 2/3 vote because it's taking money out of the capital stabilization fund to fund many of these projects. So when you see that in the town meeting, that's all that means, right? And then we get into the water and
or it's a borrowing. Or we may do a borrowing to fund the project.
Well, I don't know that those are...
Not, the ones in Article 9 are not, but the ones 10, 11,
right.
12 are borrowing.
And so that's, again, that gets to that. I look at 10, 11, and 12 as infrastructure improvements. Much of the upfront money is coming from water receipts, but the extra money for constructions and one article might be borrowed. Is that correct?
That's
is that
correct,
fair?
yeah. Yep.
Okay, and then Article 13, we're already at 13. This is
Yep.
good.
That's a consent agenda item. It's our annual Chapter 90 allotment.
And that's from the state. That's money for roads. And 14 is the
It's another consent agenda item. It's a school vending machine.
vending machines, right? And then 15 is
It's an appropriation to fund
set aside some dollars.
for collective bargaining agreements for
And
employees.
we do that typically also, but that's not on the consent agenda. But during negotiation years, that's not an unusual
Yes.
exercise.
I mean, you want to carry money in the budget to meet our obligations to our employees
So it's
without
not
necessarily telling them without
How much?
Yeah, how much. I
Or
mean,
having to hold up giving them the money until the next town meeting.
correct. Or
which
having
is-
to go back in the fall and ask for
Right.
money that may or may not be
So
there.
there's no surprise here. This is going on.
Yeah,
this
this is-
money is going to be appropriated.
This is a past practice, and it works out very well because then you know your parameters, you know the limits of what you can negotiate to up front.
And 16 is the one I had a question with you about, is about the new adult center. Everybody knows there's been conversation about a new adult center. And it's to transfer money that's already been appropriated for one reason to be used for another reason. So could you just explain that?
So we received $50,000, I believe last fall, from the town meeting to do some additional planning work for a new adult center. This is something that's been percolating for over a year. The committee, the town manager's task force recommended a site right behind the baseball fields at Turner Park. There's now a select board committee that's going to be impaneled to look at essentially the same information. But one of the things that I know Chairman Richard Foster felt strongly about, and I agree, is that we've been having this ongoing dialogue alongside these, like whether it's the DPW or the middle school or the senior center. We've been having a parallel dialogue about our tax rate and our ability to pay going forward, and our need to generate additional tax revenue. In fact, we have a survey that you can find on the town's website about our long-range plan that I encourage everybody to go and fill out. Unfortunately, the only way to really do the survey effectively, because of how it's constructed, is online.
That's okay.
But if you're not as computer savvy or intimidated by an online survey, you can go to the library or the adult center or come to town hall, and we can find somebody to help you go through it. But the important thing is getting out there and engaging the community in a dialogue about parcels that are not developed that could be, to help sustain our operations.
Don't get off point.
No, I know. But the big part of this is Turner Park is one of the biggest ones we have, and we felt that it shouldn't just be looking at this one little site in isolation. What's the potential for the whole site going forward? And
So this isn't. That was my question. So this isn't just about the senior center.
It's about Turner Park.
This is about Turner Park.
Correct.
Okay. So if you're not comfortable with potentially changing the use of Turner Park, you want to vote against this. If you're comfortable with the idea, with the concept you're just talking about, you want to vote for this.
Yeah.
So this is not saying, this is what my question is that I want the senior center to be in Turner Park, because I don't even know that I've ever been to a meeting about where it should be.
But there was a committee that did it. There was an architect that made the recommendation.
No, all of that above,
Right.
but that's not what this is about.
I guess I would say it is really just it's really to help the appropriation that is to plan one facility, to broaden the scope, that if we are truly going to plan a facility at Turner Park, which has been the recommendation that's been accepted by the select board, it really should look at the entire Turner parcel. And it really is more of a planning exercise than anything else.
So in other words, you're saying that the current site, renovating the current council on aging site is off the table?
I wouldn't say anything is on or off the table. I'm just saying that the committee and the select board have chosen this path of Turner parcel
That's their
to
preference.
advance their study.
Okay, so that's great. That's good information. Thank you. So 17 is on the consent agenda. It's the admin money for the community preservation. And then 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22 are all community preservation related issues, and that will be presented to folks at the town meeting, and that's the money that's matched by, we raise it from our tax dollars in Long Meadow, and that we have contribution from the state, and these projects have restrictions on them, but these are presented, so I don't know that we need to. It's up to you.
You'd speak to it better now when you're on the committee.
Well, I don't know that I need to. I think that these are pretty friendly and will be explained, and probably not a whole lot of time spent on them. You did the 23 and 24, and then we're into one of the, so the town meeting appropriates money and sets the budget. The town meeting also deals with bylaws and zoning bylaws. So it looks to me like 25 is a general bylaw, and that is also on the consent agenda, because it's said that it's some typo,
It's literally a typo.
and you have to go back to town meeting for that. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't want people changing a may to a shall and calling it a typo.
No, okay. Okay, so 25 relates to Conservation Commission.
That's not what this does, by the way. I'm just saying that this is a reason why the letter of the bylaw needs to be approved by town meeting.
Okay, so that's what 25 is, and hopefully that'll be done by
No,
consent.
it's you can see it's a typo.
Okay, so, and then 26 is another general bylaw, and it's about tree warden records and activities, and neither Steve or I don't understand it, and there's more to it than you or I understand, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on that today, but just to say that's what that's about. And general bylaws, to my recollection, are a majority vote, not a two-thirds vote. Zoning bylaw would be a two-thirds vote, but that's not that.
The only comment I make is we are Tree City USA. We do have to have our bylaws structured in a certain way to continue to be eligible, which also opens up the opportunity for grants. Jeff McGallman, who's our deputy DPW director, is also our tree warden. This is something he's been working closely with the tree committee on. The tree committee is a very dedicated and knowledgeable group of people, so I trust them and I trust Jeff, and I have gone through this. I don't have the context of how the tree committee would apply this, but I do know that these are changes recommended largely to sustain our designation as Tree City.
Yeah, and it's better defines what they're supposed to do according to
Yeah.
what the explanation. So this
Yes.
is probably pretty benign, but it is long, so people might go, but it's it's probably pretty benign.
Motion to waive the full reading, I think, is what hopefully we'll hear on that one.
Oh, good, good, to save time, sure,
Yes.
sure. So then we get into the petition articles, and we didn't mention, and maybe this is a time to mention it. Before this, by the way, we're going to insert, after Article 9, or right around Article 9 of the warrant, they're going to insert the special town meeting within the town meeting. Those two
We
articles.
chose that location because thematically the articles fit
That's fine.
about capital and everything else, so that's why we chose that spot.
Great. What was I going to say?
So
about
on the
this?
citizens petitions, I think, they
Explain
are.
what that is.
A citizens petition is a direct appeal from a citizen to the legislative branch.
It only takes 10 signatures.
10 signatures to get it on, 10 signatures, 10 certified signatures, and it's the really bedrock of town meeting form of government in that individual citizens can ask the legislative branch for certain legislative actions that they want to see. Select Board Member Mark Gold always talks about how you could have a citizen's petition come in that says everyone should paint their house purple,
Yeah.
and you could.
Yeah.
These have more meaningful subject matter for that, but
Right.
it is the ultimate form of self-determination. Some of them are more controversial than others. I, as town manager, because they are not official town business, I usually don't take a side one way or the other.
Correct.
But some of them do relate to operational or policy decisions that have already been made by the town. One is the speed limit one.
Well, let me back up and say, some of these, all of these, even all the warrant articles we do, and in these petitions included, have to be accepted, approved by the Attorney General. So at the end of the day, we may say, the town may vote for all of these, and the Attorney General may say, this is not a legal, this is not enforceable, or that kind of thing. So we don't know that going into this. We won't know that until after the town meeting. There's some suspicions about some of them may or may not meet.
We've been doing some
muster.
research. I mean, I think one of the things we've been doing is, even though they're not official town business, we have been doing our own research on those types of issues, so we are prepared to answer questions. We feel like, as the professional
Sure.
administrators of the community, like our police department or our DPW director, the people who will end up having to either administer or enforce some of these, town meeting may say, well, Chief Stankiewicz, what's the story with the speed limits? And so we'll be prepared to answer questions like that. But these are really, it's not for the select board or the town manager to say these are right or wrong. It's
Right.
a citizen, ultimately, as you know, it is the Attorney General.
Well, it
but
says if it's legal or not.
If it's legal.
And then it's got to figure out how it's implemented. But the citizen will be reading this. The discussion will be, Rebecca Townsend is the moderator, is going to be very careful about people being respectful to each other during some of these controversial things. And then there's the rule, the 5 for and 5 against rule, which she would probably welcome. And that is, if 5 people speak for and 5 against a motion, somebody may call the question and there's no debate. It's just, we will vote on the question. So that's an attempt to, again, move the meeting along in a fair and reasonable way. These are always, in my experience, positioned at the end of the warrant. It's not anybody's personal vendetta. It's just
the warrant's always been structured that way. The
Right.
business of the town comes first.
before,
Yep.
before that. So what did you want to add something about?
So
couple-
there are a couple that are not bylaw related, so they would not go to the Attorney General, and they're more kind of, I guess, non-binding resolutions. But the one on the speed limits, I would just advise people that there is a state policy and state law out there that govern the establishment of speed limits.
The procedure to it.
The procedure to it. The Boston City Council there was a story in the Boston Globe a few weeks ago about this very subject. We do have some information on that, but basically, the state you have to do a certain number of traffic studies, and then the state DOT has to sign off on it before it can be enforceable. So even if this passes and we change the signs, the police may not be able to enforce that.
So it's not as easy as it might sound.
Correct. I just
And
want people to know what they're
there's more to
voting
some of this
on.
in the background.
Right.
And then,
The one on Quinnetuck Road is, Quinnetuck Road was closed by the Select Board. The Select Board, under the law, does have the ability to make alterations to roadways. That's different than saying abandoned right-of-way, which is a distinction. Sometimes we
Right.
don't have time to go into all that.
Right.
But basically, the Select Board can still keep the road closed, even if this resolution passed. And so,
If in their best judgment, that was
if in the best
better.
judgment it meets the needs of the community the traffic safety.
Okay, then we've got some gun issues, and you were going to mention about bringing a gun or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's already. I don't know that people will do this, but sometimes, based on watching national news,
Well,
sometimes when there
apparently quite a few out-of-town, not residents have expressed interest in coming to this meeting.
correct, and sometimes people like to, because they have the ability to license to carry. They like to carry and come to the meeting and as a demonstration of their Second Amendment rights. And we don't, no judgment on that. It's just it's already against state law to have a gun inside the school and
Or any municipal building?
I think municipal buildings, but I'm 100% sure on the schools. Yeah. We've talked to our police department about this. We'll be reminding. We're hoping people will be reminded of this. So if you come to town meeting and intend to legally carrying a firearm, you will be asked to leave and face the potential of being arrested if you don't, because they're just not allowed in the schools. It's not like we're trying to infringe people's rights. It's already against the law. Right. And that's part of just keeping, people so they don't to avoid confrontation.
Yeah,
we want to make
order.
sure manage people's expectations of what the enforcement will be.
And the other thing that Rebecca was very clear on when I interviewed her about the town meeting was there's a certain section within the gymnasium that's set aside for non-voters, people who...
For visitors.
Visitors, exactly. Thank you. So anybody can attend, but they can't, the people who are authorized to vote will everybody's got to sit, but the people who are not registered voters can sit in a certain section. If that section becomes full, it's not that we're going to have people standing around in the gymnasium. There will be a backup room where the meeting will be televised to accommodate that. It won't be that there'll be other. There is only one dedicated space.
There's overflow for town meeting resident voters,
Yep.
and then there's overflow for visitors.
Okay.
And the one thing I think is important to note is visitors are not allowed to speak on town meeting unless they are granted special permission
In advance.
in advance by the moderator.
That's correct.
And goes back time immemorial.
Nothing
town
to do
meeting.
with this issue?
Nothing to do with this year. If you go read town meeting time, which came out, I don't know, 100 years ago, it's black and white in there. And town meeting time is our governing document for town meeting. And the moderator, Becky's worn out her copy of it by making sure she's prepared.
Sure. Interesting.
Just one of the two things I want to, the one other one I touch on is the Wolf Swamp Fields.
Yep.
I know this has been a hot button issue in town as we look for a site for a new DPW facility, which is greatly in need. There is a committee that was impaneled by the select board. Arlene is in fact on it, and as she can tell you, there has been a lot of research and work going into all of the sites in the community. So I'm not going to ask town meeting voters to vote one way or the other, but just to remind people that there is a committee looking at this that will make a recommendation.
And they have not made a recommendation.
They have not made a recommendation, but they will be making a recommendation to the select board. And the committee has been focused on keeping all options on the table, and we hope town meeting voters will bear that in mind. That I think the key thing is, as you consider this, I think anyone, including me, would say Wolf Swamp Field is not an ideal place for a DPW facility, but you have to look at what are our other alternatives. And
We're not giving a pro or con.
No,
We're just mentioning that.
Right. It's what are our alternatives, and so saying take one location, whatever it is, take one location off the table without looking at the alternatives is something that the committee is trying to resist doing. And so that's one of the things that we hope town meeting voters will keep in mind.
Okay, one other thing I think we might, I know we're running close to or beyond our half-hour time,
This was
but
right on, yeah.
we're doing pretty well. But is the first motion in the consent? I don't know if this whole thing is called the consent agenda, but before the town meeting, at the beginning of the town meeting, the voters, according to Rebecca, and you may know more about this than I do, in order to be respectful for folks' time and planning, and the anticipation that this might be a late meeting, she's asking the voters to vote for a resolution to consider ending the meeting at 10:30, or if they're on the second last or second to last article, continue it, but to set a time deadline at the beginning of the night. And so people just need to be aware of that vote could be amended to be 11 or 11:30, or it could be defeated, and we could just go on, whatever. I don't think there's any precedent for it one way or another.
Yeah.
It's just an attempt to sort of say to the body that shows up, if you want to set a limit, we can do that at the beginning. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I think one of the things as we've mentioned, we've tried to be as foresightful as we possibly can, and really plan ahead. I think everyone hopes against hope that the town meeting, the business of the town meeting is entirely resolved that evening. But if it gets to be, if items that we think are non-controversial or won't generate a lot of discussion end up generating a lot of discussion, and in the 4 town meetings or 5 town meetings I've been to, there's always one that you don't see coming.
$15 one.
Yeah, it could be the tree
Right.
committee thing.
Right.
Something comes out of woodwork. We end up spending 45 minutes on an article that we thought was going to blow right through,
Right.
and it gets to be 10 or 10:30, and we haven't even gotten to the citizens petitions, which we know are going to generate a significant amount of debate. I think the moderator feels it's in everybody's best interest to adjourn to the next night. We've already reserved the gymnasium versus keeping people in the room till after midnight. And I think
So there's 2 ways to approach that. One is vote for this article or not, or amend it to maybe a little bit later, or be cooperative, respectful, and approve the consent agenda, move along through the easier articles so that there is breathing room at the end of the evening to accommodate everything. Obviously, it's in everybody's best interest to do this in one night.
I do think so, and honestly, that's why I would, and I normally don't do this, but if there's one motion I encourage everyone to support, it's that one, because I think you need to establish that at the beginning so people understand at the end of the meeting, especially if it is 10:30 and the room is tense or there's been a lot of activity, people understand what's going to happen automatically because they heard it back at the beginning of the meeting before the debate started. And even if you approve the motion, and if we get all of the business done, we don't have to meet the next night. It's not obligating you to meet the next night, but it's giving us the option, and we're setting that parameter, if you will,
Right at the front.
right up front.
Yeah.
And so I encourage people to support that. It's really just a backstop,
Well, she also did say you can amend that.
and you can.
Just know, if it comes to be 10 and we have just 5 articles left or 4 articles left, and people think, well, let's roll up our sleeves and get through.
Let's grind it
this.
out, yep.
You grind it out, they can amend that. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting public civics lesson, this town meeting. Anything else you want to add?
I've heard comments and discussions of recent town meetings about turnout and low turnout, and sometimes people talk about the decisions that get made. It is the legislative branch. It's where these types of decisions get made, and the important decisions get made. We just saw what happened in East Longmeadow, and I think one of the reasons why they changed their form of government was not only because of the well-documented issues they've had with their select board, but also because they've had a fairly lengthy history of poorly attended town meetings. And I don't think people really embraced it. I know the town of Longmeadow embraces town meeting, but the last annual town meeting was about 150 people. Right. And that was really half of the size of the annual town meetings that I had previously observed.
Well, there was very little meat. I mean, there was a lot of money, but nothing much controversial.
Not too much controversial, but it's still important to get out there and have your voice heard. So I'm hoping, the first time I remember the first time we did this, the high school was under construction, and we spent almost the entire time talking about parking and logistics and everything else. The high school is very accessible. There's tons of parking, so those issues aren't really barriers to attending a town meeting like they used to be. So we hope people will attend.
Yeah, and it's very important. I think it's going to be a very exciting town meeting. I think it's going to be one of our finest hours. It's Rebecca's first annual town meeting. I think she's ready. I think the select board and you are ready certainly for this. School committee budget. I'm very excited about it. I think some good in my mind, town meeting it's a hard thing to prep for. It's a hard thing to get through. But at the end of the day, it tends to make good decisions and good decisions for the community. So I don't always agree with them, but I think they're good decisions for the community. So, Stephen, thank you for taking the time to do this. I know you're very busy this time of the year. Thank you to our listeners for listening. And again, if you haven't gotten this, are there extra copies available?
Tons of copies in the town manager's office, or you can call 565-4110, and we can try and get you a copy. It's on the website.
Right.
As well.
So it's a lot of information, not just the warrant, but the background to the warrant.
Each article has a brief description of what it's about.
Right.
We will have copies available that evening at town meeting. So
come prepared to participate, and thank you for listening. Again, I'm Arlene Miller. This is Town Manager Stephen Crane, and see you at town meeting. Thank you.